shopgear.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
What's up, Rock Soldiers? This is Rockstar Robbie Vegas coming at you with another episode of All Bets Are Off. Today's going to be a lot of fun. We have Justin Credible on the show. Yes, that's right. ECW original Justin Credible started his career in the WWE as an enhancement talent, and in the mid-90s was Aldo Montoya. Of course, goes on to make a huge name for himself with Extreme Championship Wrestling, part of the Impact Players with Lance Storm. So PJ's got a long storied career. He's been all over the place. He's got a lot to talk about. So I won't waste any time. We've been doing a few shows together. We got a few more. He's a great guy. And I think that you'll all really enjoy hearing his story and where he's at right now. Alright, Rock Soldiers, so I got Justin Credible on the line right now, and first thing I want to do is thank you, man, for doing this. I truly appreciate your time.
Oh, no, thank you very much for having me, man. I always appreciate it.
Oh, for sure, man. We've done a few shows together in the past month, and, you've been a real genuine, awesome guy, and couldn't thank you enough for that.
Oh, no, always looking forward to talking to, fans of pro wrestling, people that are into pro wrestling, and also, just getting the message out, and kind of passing on the knowledge that I've acquired over 26 plus years of being in the business. So it's cool for me as well. So thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. So let's just start back where you first got into wrestling. How did that happen for you?
Well, I got into wrestling in 1992. I was a fan ever since I saw Hulk Hogan beat the Iron Sheik for the WWF title. And, when I graduated high school in 1991, I kind of knew I wanted to be a pro wrestler, but back in the day, internet wasn't even a thing. It didn't exist, and wrestling, there was still a lot of the kayfabe thing going on. There weren't, a lot of schools that were really available. They didn't advertise it and stuff like that, so you really had to know people in the industry, which, of course, I didn't know anybody. So I worked after I didn't go to college. After high school, I was working at a grocery store, and at the time, and they still have them today, but there was the news racks where they have the old school wrestling magazines, and Pro Wrestling Illustrated happened to be there, and during my break, I picked up a copy, and believe it or not, the Hart brothers out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Keith Hart and Bruce Hart, were advertising a pro wrestling camp, and summer of 1992, I'd saved money, and summer of 92, I went up to Calgary, and my first pro match was October 16th, 1992, on my birthday, and I turned 19 up there, and that was how it all got started.
Awesome, okay. And now, when you were first making appearances in the WWF, you were an enhancement talent, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that to me is amazing because I feel that a lot of enhancement talent doesn't end up getting like a push, but you became Aldo Montoya, so how did that happen?
Well, it was a really interesting time for the business of pro wrestling. In 92, business, the WWF was coming out of the Hulk Hogan era and the Ultimate Warrior era, and business in 92 was starting to kind of go down a little bit. Hulk had, he wasn't wrestling as much, and Warrior kind of wasn't really as over as Hulk was, and, was giving Vince a little bit of a hard time, so they were going with champions like, Yokozuna and so forth. It was just a transitional period. So one day, I had my first 10 matches in Calgary. So I'd say about January or February, I don't know for sure, I don't remember, but one of those months, I went to a WWE house show because I really had no connections in pro wrestling in America. I had my first 10 matches in Calgary where I wrestled Lance Storm, Chris Jericho, a bunch of, Calgary Stampede, like the old Stampede Wrestling guys over there. So I had a little bit of experience, but 10 matches isn't much, and I really didn't have any connections. So I live in Connecticut. I went to a house show for WWF, and I met with Tony Gurria, who was a former WWF Tag Team Champion and was an agent at the time, a producer. And, I just said, look, I have my gear. I'm just trying to make some connections. So he let me hang backstage, let me watch the show. So at the end, I went to thank him, for, being so hospitable and letting me in and enjoy the show and whatever. And I gave him my number, and he said, well, in a couple of months, we're going to be doing a new show live every 2 weeks out of Manhattan called Monday Night Raw. And we could use some enhancement talent, some extras. And, that's really it. That's how it started. And to further go on that, one of the reasons that I got picked up being a jobber, was after establishing myself, about a year and a half of doing jobs and, doing a good job for the WWF as an enhancement talent. They had a gimmick with The Undertaker, and they had the Faker Taker, the fake, the imitation Undertaker that was played by Brian Lee.
Yes.
And, I lived in Connecticut about 45 miles. To this day, I still live about 45 miles from the Stamford office. So they were looking for somebody to come in and work with Mark Calloway, Undertaker, and Brian Lee, who played the fake Undertaker. Just kind of work out with them all week because, he was going to go live on Monday Night Raw to do the fake Undertaker. And so we worked out all week. And on the final day, it was like a Monday through Friday deal. On the final day, Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson, who at the time Pat Patterson was Vince's right-hand man, and which you could kind of say, bookers, which doesn't really exist anymore. It's more, writers, but him and Vince were the bookers, and they were there to watch the kind of a walkthrough, like, a dress rehearsal, really. Mark was there. Brian Lee was in full Undertaker makeup, and I was going to be the enhancement talent, the jobber, going through the spots and stuff. So, that happened. After that, everybody was happy. But I established a relationship with Pat and Vince McMahon, and from then on, the Portuguese Man of War, Aldo Montoya, came about,
Awesome. Very cool. Now, I know back then, I've heard this before, I don't know if this is true, but you were considered a member of the original Kliq, right?
That's what everybody says, yeah. I mean, I certainly was friends with all those guys. We traveled up and down the road, specifically, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Sean Waltman, Scott Hall. And actually all of them, really, we were all very close. I mean, every time I see those guys, the thing is, but when you talk about the Kliq, and you talk about, I wasn't really over in the WWF. And even when I went back with X Factor, when Pac and I teamed up, I just wasn't, when they do these reunions and they do the Kliq, it's like I'm the other guy that doesn't really get brought up in the gimmick. And that's fine, because it's really, at the end of the day, it's now become more of a marketing tool. But I was there every tour, every car ride, know all the stories, and to this day still keep in touch with a lot of those guys. So sometimes it sucks when people ask the question, because it's like, well, why aren't you there? And I guess it's a marketing gimmick that WWE doesn't really want to acknowledge. And but it doesn't, it doesn't bother me. It's just it's one of those things, because if I was probably more over as a superstar, I would have been included, because at the end of the day, it's business for them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. No, I understand. And I was curious about that, because you had given myself and my tag team partner some advice on the first show that we did with you that you said was passed down from Scott Hall, which sparked that question in my mind of you being in the Kliq. But do you have like a very fond memory of your first run with WWF?
I really do. I was very young, and I knew when I was given the Aldo character, I certainly realized and understood that it wasn't going to be, it wasn't going to be a thing that would last for a long time. It wasn't going to be the staple that I would be remembered by, or the mark that I would make in the business. It was just simply a gimmick that, I was a young kid. I had a job. I was grateful. I was making six figures. A lot of people weren't doing that. And it was just a learning experience. So I took that in stride, and it just really, I have fond memories, because I traveled the world, many times over, getting to learn the business, wrestle with some of the greatest in the world. I mean, if you listen to my podcasts I've done 2 for the Steve Austin show. Steve speaks very fondly of me, where we to go up and down the road wrestling one another and become friends. And really, we helped each other. We learned from each other, and I really got to work with some of the greats. So really, it just kind of helped me become the best pro wrestler I could be in those 2.5 to 3 years that I spent there as PJ and Aldo. You know what I'm saying?
Awesome. Okay, very cool. Now, and then you ended up going to ECW. So how did that happen?
In about, summer of '97, I was starting to get frustrated. I was 23 years old working for the WWF, and I was getting paid. I was booked and all that, but things were starting to happen in the business. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, who were friends, got signed or went to WCW and started to do the NWO. And I was talking to Scott. Scott's like, "Yo, we got Bischoff's here. If you want a job, you got one." And I just, it wasn't necessarily about money. It was just about I'm starting to come into my own as a performer. I felt like I'm just sitting here kind of wasting away as Aldo. And the business was really starting to heat up with the Monday Night Wars. So I went to Vince. I scheduled a meeting, went up to Stamford, and me and Vince in a room. And I was like, "Vince, I want my release. I want to go to WCW." And Vince wasn't too happy about it. He was very much like, well, not about the character of Aldo. Not that was what he was worried about, but he's like, the perception of another one of my guys going over at this crucial time. It's not, I'm not having it. He goes, "So what I'll do is I'll send you to Jerry Lawler's territory in Memphis, USWA at the time, and because we didn't have a developmental system." And he goes, "I want you to learn how to work as a heel, and we'll bring you back up to the main roster," which there was only a main roster, what am I saying? But bring you back up from working Lawler's territory, still getting paid by WWF, as a heel. So I was there for 6 weeks, did that whole deal, and one of the last weeks I was there, Jerry Lawler was doing an angle with ECW and Paul Heyman where, it was like, Jerry Lawler against ECW, and if you remember back in the day that they had a little thing going where they were crossing over to ECW TV and USWA TV, Team ECW, Team Jerry Lawler.
Yes.
And Chris Candido and I were good friends. He was there with me for a while as, remember Skip and Sonny?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The Body Donnas. So, I'd known Chris and we'd worked together a million times. So, he was like, "Dude, why don't you just come to ECW? They'll pay you good and there's a lot of opportunity." And ECW had just gotten a deal to go on pay-per-view and things were really happening. So, Paul Heyman and I got to talk, and through Chris Candido, and Heyman went to Vince and got my release, conditional release, where I was released to ECW, not WCW.
Okay.
So, that was kind of a thing where as long as you go to ECW and blah, blah, blah. Little did we know, speculation is that the entire time Vince was kind of funding ECW all along. But that's speculation. But anyways, but that's what happened. So
okay. So you get to ECW and you're main eventer, you become just incredible, and you even form the Impact Players with Lance Storm. Now, for you, as a performer, did that solidify to you that you could carry a company and you are that main eventer?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's really what it became about. I mean, it was a great time in the business, and within a 2-year period, I became, the guy that wore a jock strap on his head. Really, everybody was saying that, and, it's what it was. And now, all of a sudden, I'm in Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, all over LA, all over the world, main eventing pay-per-views and TV shows and house shows for what is, one of the hardest companies to work for, because the fans, if you remember, were unrelenting.
Oh, for sure.
They would bury you if they didn't like you. And remember, I'm the guy with the jockstrap. So now I'm main eventing your pay-per-views and your house shows and your company and your television. So, it made me, I kind of jumped that hurdle to, no pun intended, a little bit of credibility as a performer. And that's all it really, that's all really what meant a lot to me, is just knowing that I could still do this, at a high level, and it was really, it was great.
Excellent. So now you were part of the Impact Players with Lance Storm, and you did mention him earlier from your Calgary days. Were you guys put together by, just kind of accident, or was that an idea that you had because you had already known each other, or how did the Impact Players start?
that was all Paul Heyman. Believe it or not, he knew our history. He knew that Lance and I had come up in Calgary together, and it was all Paul's idea. And really, it just, man, for something that was just done on a whim, it was the perfect fit because, Lance at the time was very much a great in-ring technical wrestler, performer, and I was a good performer, but I had more of the character kind of stuff, more of the, Lance didn't do really, the promos weren't really his thing and so forth. So we were kind of the best of both worlds. What I wasn't as far as technical ability, Lance was. And what Lance, at the time, he then became, came into his own later in his career, but what Lance didn't have as far as charisma and interview skills and so forth, I had. So it's like, we kind of were the exact opposites, but that blended together so perfectly into becoming, a lot of people say one of the best tag teams of the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was really effortless because, coming from the same school, and quite frankly, Lance was there. Lance was my third or fourth ever match in my life.
Right.
First ever, it was a handful of, of one of my first matches. Not only that, but he helped teach the Hart Brothers camp. So a lot of my training really came from Lance. So we were just, we were always friends, but we became closer both professionally and personally. And it was just, it was effortless, man. We just went out there and had fun. And if you really go back and watch the old TV tapings, we were just having a ball. And it was so much fun. It was one of the best times of my career,
Yeah, and I mean, that does come through and it does show. I know in my earlier teenage years, the Impact Players were my favorite tag team. That's just, it was such a big thing. And me being from Buffalo, New York, ECW was huge here. So that was big too. Coming from that, WWE ends up purchasing WCW and I believe ECW. And that's when you had mentioned earlier that you would come back to be a part of X Factor with X-Pac, Sean Waldman. Now, was that something that you guys decided to do, or did that just work out in your favor?
That just kind of worked out when ECW went under. My only move at the time was to simply, I emailed Jim Ross and I said, look, I just left ECW. They had yet to announce that they had gone under, but I knew the writing on the wall. So, and I wasn't getting paid. So I was like, well, before everybody starts jumping ship, I better be one of the first, or else I'm going to be asked out of a job, because regardless of how good you are, there's only so many spots in a company. And at the time, WCW was hurting as well. So I knew I had to act quickly. And I did. And Jim Ross just simply said, okay, we'll offer you X amount of, six-figure deal, X amount of money for 3 years. And I jumped on it. And I literally found out about what I was going to be doing the night I showed up to the Nassau Coliseum in Long Island, New York.
Oh, okay.
And I found out that I was going to be teaming with X-Pac, and which was great because Sean and I had been friends and worked. Actually, there's footage out there of Aldo Montoya and the 1-2-3 Kid as a tag team. We'd actually done that a couple times. You know what I mean? So and we knew each other. Obviously, he was coming out of a hot run with DX. I was coming off of being just incredible, and actually, it was like almost like a no-brainer. Unfortunately, what killed that gimmick was simply the alliance deal, because that's what really broke up the X Factor. Because when the alliance happened, they wanted me to be part of the faction of ECW/WCW in the alliance,
right?
And obviously, X-Pac was going with the WWF.
Okay.
So it sucks because and a lot of people actually these days, when I check social media, they talk about it like one of the most underrated tag teams that could have been something really special was Sean Waltman and I, because we were both at our prime, both as performers and in every aspect. We were in great shape, doing our best work. And, it's something that could have been, because at the time, WWE was really lacking great tag teams. They were just coming out of the Edge and Christian, Hardy Boys, Bubba, Devon feud, and they kind of needed something fresh. But anyways, it is what it is. So.
Well, that being said, did you enjoy the angle that you ended up doing with the Alliance, or would you have preferred to just kind of ride out the X Factor thing?
Oh, no, I hated it. I was a big player. No, it sucked. It was horrible. I would have loved to have continued with X Factor, and Sean, I believe, feels the same way. We talked about it on his podcast. But, it's stuff that's out of your control, man. At the end of the day, when you're a wrestler, and especially when it becomes as big as it has these days, all you are is like an actor in a movie. You can't write your own script.
Yeah.
You kind of just got to do what's handed to you. You're just, and in those days too, there were, right now we're going through a wrestling renaissance where so many opportunities, Impact, AEW, TNA, ROH, WWE, all over the world. I mean, New Japan, there's a million places to work, and not to mention MLW. I mean, there's, again, MLW, so many great indies too. So there's a lot of work out there, but back then you really didn't have what we have today. So it's like you had two things to do. Nothing and like it. And, it's like you better just you're lucky you're in. And I was just lucky to have a spot. So, but eventually that ran dry as well when they started just jobbing me out and using me as alliance fodder and winning the hardcore title a million times. Bullshit and stuff like that. But, it's what it is.
Well, staying on that topic too of the different companies, you also ended up jumping over to TNA for a little bit when they did like a revival of like ECW. They had a bunch of former ECW stars come in for a feud. Did you enjoy your time with TNA when that whole thing was going on?
I did. Especially, I was there several times, several different incarnations.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, every time I was in TNA, the creatively was okay. The pay wasn't great. That was the biggest problem. And at the end of the day, especially when you've been making money, in the WWE or, and then quite frankly, the first job I had after WWE when I got let go in 2003 was All Japan Pro Wrestling.
Okay.
A lot of people don't remember that, but I went to All Japan Pro Wrestling for a couple months and did some tours out there. But so when you go to TNA, it's like you're getting paid, pennies on the dollar. So it was a little rough, and they mismanaged a lot of the stuff there as well. They tried to replicate a lot of the ECW stuff. I do remember having a great feud with Jerry Lynn that they still put out there on their streaming service. And if you guys if fans are interested, they should kind of go back and check it out, because Jerry Lynn and I always had great matches. But in TNA, we just kind of picked up where we left off in ECW, and it was a lot of fun. But then again, it wasn't enough to provide for my family until in 2005 when One Night Stand came up for the WWE, and I got a call to go do that.
Right, and then of course that stemmed to WWE bringing back their own brand of ECW, and you were a part of that. So you find yourself back in WWE for the third time. How did you feel about that whole thing on the Sci-Fi Network and trying to revive the ECW name?
I thought it was amazing. I thought it could definitely work. The only thing that my original, thinking on it was ECW, we made a name for ourselves, being the rebels, like talking shit about WCW, how corny they were, mm-hmm. or how silly WWF was, or, it was WWF at the time, but how silly they were and how, kind of corny they were, and we were the rebels. So it's really hard when your whole gimmick is anti-establishment, and now the man controls you.
Right.
Yeah. But they pulled it off, and I don't know how, but the original One Night Stand,
yes,
was a legitimate ECW show. We did ECW. I was part of the match with Chris Jericho and Lance Storm, where I came in and hit him with the kendo stick, and also came in and interfered in the main event with Tommy Dreamer Sandman versus the Dudley Boys. We did some barbed wire stuff with Beulah and Francine and all that gimmick. But when it came down to the second one, John Cena was on the show, Rey Mysterio, and again, nothing against Rey Mysterio, but Rey Mysterio was there for one or two shows. No way is he. You know what I mean? They started to say like Eddie and Dean and Benoit. They were ECW guys. They were there for like a couple of shows, so they were trying to sell it as something it wasn't. So right away you could just kind of see that it was going south. And even though the second One Night Stand wasn't too bad, it was already desecrating ECW. Mm-hmm. And we were hoping for the best. I had the one good thing I do say about the WWE's version of ECW is I got to debut CM Punk. And it was actually a great match. He was so grateful for that match and how I put him over. And it was actually a very competitive match. If you go back and watch his debut, on ECW TV that he was in tears, crying. He was so grateful, and he was a fan of mine, and I didn't know much about him from Ring of Honor, but and it just launched one of the greatest careers in pro wrestling history. So I'm just great. I'm grateful to be part of that. You know, there was there's always positives with the negatives if you look for them. But anyways, but that's kind of where it started to go downhill. And ECW obviously didn't take much time to turn into Big Show being the champion and Vince McMahon being the champion and all the bullshit that came with it that had nothing to do with Extreme Championship Wrestling, just a bunch of bullshit. And in essence, it was NXT, and they were just trying it out with ECW because the brand had, it was worth money. The name ECW to this day is still worth money. To this day, they still chant ECW at WWE shows. So they recognized the value of it, but they just didn't know how to pull it off. But I'm just glad that it's now gone and buried, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And now, when it does resurface, it's usually like a greatest ECW DVD or something like that, but it shows the original, not anything from the recreation, Yeah,
of course, yeah.
So now you're out here on the indie scene, which is how I met you. We've like I said earlier, we've done a few shows together now, and I think we have another coming up. But do you have like a bucket list of things you're trying to accomplish with anyone on the indies? Is there anybody you'd really like to work right now that you haven't had a chance to yet?
Not really. The only thing that the only thing that really kind of is interesting to me is very recently I was offered a unique opportunity to run a wrestling company and to be part of a wrestling company. There's this wrestling company in Massachusetts called Battlefront Pro Wrestling, run by Dan and Ray Gore, and I work for them, just as an indie wrestler. And my friend Scotty Anarchy, who also is a professional musician, has two albums out. One recently just dropped called Seeing Red, which we did a music video for, which actually Jason Powell from ProWrestling.net just featured on his website a couple days ago. They offered us to do an offshoot of it and to almost run our own thing with our own brand, like an extension of Battlefront Pro in Connecticut. So November 9th, we are going to be running Battlefront Pro Extreme, which is basically adult-oriented wrestling. Adult-oriented pro wrestling, kind of what ECW is. And, it's 18 and over kind of a thing, and we're going to be doing a lot of risque stuff or more mature storylines. This is stuff that's not necessarily for kids, and we're going to try to kind of get back to what ECW's original vibe was, not necessarily the violence or tables, chairs, and blood. That's, of course there'll be a little bit of that, but it's not, what I'm trying to say is adult entertainment.
Right.
Like how there's a rated R movie. We want to be like that for pro wrestling, where we can swear, and if we want to do something a little more risque, there's not going to be kids in the audience. And I think there's a need for that as well, because pro wrestling is a lot of things to a lot of people. A lot of kids like it, a lot of adults like it, but a lot of adults that watch WWE are kind of turned off because it's so watered down and kind of, so we're just offering an alternative, something a little more, a little more adult, a little more extreme, as the namesake would say. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. And it's really kind of that with also my podcast that I'm doing right now. I Hate This Podcast, which is available on Apple, Google, Spotify, everywhere. I've had Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, Rob Van Dam, MVP from WWE fame, and many other guys. Again, and that's going to be another focus of my thing. So right now, it's all about my new wrestling promotion and all about the podcast, and just get as many more years out of this old, tired 45-year-old body, and just do something. Just try to do something positive in the wrestling business.
Awesome, very cool, man. I really like hearing that. That's fantastic. Now, before I do let you go, though, I want you to take the time to plug your social media, and I know you just plug your podcast and your new company, but if there's any other matches or anything coming up that you'd like to plug, throw it all out there.
Yeah, definitely. My biggest social media device is Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at PJ Polacco. I'm verified, so it's easy to find. Also on Instagram, same name, PJ Polacco, Polaco. And and also we're going to be with the new promotion, Battlefront Extreme. We're going to be kind of taking the amazing model that AEW has created I used to have a channel for a series of videos that I did called Pro Wrestling 101, which was kind of an instructional thing for young men and women wanting to get into the business. And I have almost 14,000 followers. So before the launch of Battlefront Pro Wrestling Extreme, we're going to be doing something similar to the successful model that AEW did with Being the Elite. So we're going to have short videos on the channel. So if you're interested, guys, go over to YouTube and just put it in the search engine, PJ Polacco or Pro Wrestling 101 or Just Incredible, and it'll all lead you to my channel. And we'll be having, videos every week, similar to what AEW is doing, just to kind of promote the great stuff we're going to be doing in the future very soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being on the All Bets Are Off podcast, and I truly appreciate it, and I will see you in October for NTW.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Had a good time.
You too.
Demolish every single hope that ever crossed that naive little mind. And Tommy, I'm going to show all these people that Lance Storm and Just Incredible, the Impact players, we are guilty as charged.
So there you have it, All Bets Are Off listeners. We had the hardcore icon, Just Incredible, and man, what a career, and what a great guy. Really liked hearing a lot of those stories. Hopefully you guys did too. Check out his new wrestling promotion, check out his podcast, and catch him traveling the indie scene when he's in your area. So we will catch you next time on All Bets Are Off, but before I let you go, please remember to check out Unchained Muscle and Insane Labs. UnchainedMuscle.uk for all of your gym needs, hats, t-shirts, shorts, leggings, and of course you can donate to their mental health charity by purchasing an item in the mental health charity section. Our Vegas 20 saves you 20% at checkout. Insane Labs, follow the link in the description of this show. Please use that specific link and use code RVegas30 to save 50% on your gym supplements, whether it be BCAAs, pre-workouts, testosterone boosters, glutamine, whatever you need, it's all there. It's all great. I've never looked better or felt better. Check it out and keep this podcast going.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.